Yogani, we got a call from Pennsylvania, and help me with the pronunciation. Is it Sveta? Sveta? Svetcha. Меня зовут Scott.
Hi, Yogani.
Hello, how are you, Sveta?
I'm fine. First, let me thank you for all your lessons and help at the forum and all your emails. And Scott, I want to thank you and everyone else associated with the show for giving us the opportunity to hear Yogani. Thank you.
It's certainly my pleasure.
Yogani, my question.
Yes.
In the lessons, you say to visualize the spinal nerve as a thin silver thread that extends from the root to the third eye, and to follow it with our awareness during the spinal breathing. However, for a few of us who are challenged in the internal visualizing area, how do you locate the spinal nerve?
Well, it's a sort of an interesting process because we begin using some imagination, and yes, everybody has a different ability in that, which is why I said just follow the center of the spinal column to the center of the head and forward. For those who have a more active imagination, you could imagine a tiny thread going up the center of the spinal column and forward to the center of the brow, or a tiny tube, or something like that. And the reason I say something like that, because it really doesn't matter exactly what you imagine. What matters is that you bring your attention up through that area that we're talking about and then back down like that. Now, the interesting thing about this is what we're doing really is we're setting up a condition in the nervous system where attention is activating energy in the central spinal channel, which in Sanskrit is called the sushumna. And sushumna is sort of the main highway of the nervous system, not only medically but spiritually. And it connects all of the so-called energy centers and chakras together. But we don't mind all those entrances and exits from the spinal nerve. We just work the spinal nerve. And what happens is, as we do this, we move from imagining what we're doing in the spinal nerve to actually experiencing what's happening in the spinal nerve as the energies become activated. And then, when the energies begin to become activated, we actually can perceive the spinal nerve in our inner awareness with our inner senses, if you will. We can see it, we can feel it, all the senses are involved. So it's kind of like going out and digging a gold mine. You know there's gold in the ground, and you may even have some diagrams and things that say, well, the gold is down there. So you start digging, and you dig, and you dig, and you maybe don't find the gold for a while, but you have the map, and you know where the vein is supposed to be, and you just keep digging there. And then one day, guess what? There's the gold. And it's just like that with spinal breathing. You're following a map, basically, a map of your of where we expect this energy to be activating and where we want it to activate. And then in time it becomes a self-fulfilling event. And then there's no need to imagine anymore.
You don't need to imagine it. Once you start to feel it, it yells to you. John in California, you're on with Yogani.
Yes, hi, Yogani. I'm halfway through your book, Spinal Breathing Pranayama, and it's very excellent. I want to compliment you. It's very clearly written. And I had taken up practices like this about 20 years ago, and I dropped them because they were never really explained to me in the right way. I didn't take to it, but now it's very different with your book.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. My question is, two parts. One is about the tongue. In some traditions, they put the tongue up to the roof of the mouth to complete a downward circuit. And so I want to ask you about that. And the other part of my question is, there's some circuits that go down into the leg and actually down through the front of the body, too, rather than back down the spine. And if you're probably familiar with microcosmic orbit.
Yeah, that's a Chinese system.
Yeah, so the tongue and the microcosmic orbit, I'd like you to sort of address that as it relates to this, and then I want to make one more comment. But
okay, as I mentioned, there are many, many variations on this practice. And we've essentially going between the two major points in the spinal nerve, or sushumna, if you will. There are a lot of other ways to do it. You can go out the top, you can go out the bottom, you can come down the front, you can do work at the chakras. There are many, many variations that you find in the different schools. And what we've tried to do in AYP is make it as simple as possible. We do begin to approach some of these other areas as we move on in the lessons. In fact, the new book that's coming out on samyama goes considerably beyond what we have done with the spinal nerve before. So,
yeah, you're talking fifth or sixth step there. I mean,
yeah. Now, to be specific, the tongue may naturally come up to the roof of the mouth during this practice. That is what we call an automatic yoga, if you will. It's just one of the things that can happen as energy begins to circulate. There is also a technique that's a more advanced technique that's actually covered in the asanas, mudras, and bandhas book, and that technique is called Kuchari mudra, and it's also covered in the online lessons, which does involve the use of the tongue as an additional energy circuit. As far as coming down the front is concerned, I've had discussions with people from Taoism, the Chinese system of yoga, on this numerous times, and I think it's basically a matter of approach, because the first thing we want to clear out is the spinal nerve. That's the central highway. But later on in the process, we have energy coming down the front, which is addressed in different ways in yoga, using some physical practices, which are also in that asanas, mudras, and bandhas book I mentioned. But the Chinese try and do it all in one swoop. They come up the spine and they come down the front. We don't do that in AYP. We work the front in a different way. But it's the same dynamics, it's the same principles that are being used in the human nervous system. It's just a matter of approach.
It's a matter of choice and technique. John, what was your comment?
I want to add, do you add the legs later on in your
Yeah, we're going to do something with the legs, actually, starting in the Samyama book.
Yeah. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention, very interesting quote in the Old Testament. It says, says God made their tongue stick to the roof of their mouth.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, it's people.
The more things change, the more they're the same, right?
Yeah.
I think
okay.
It might even have been cleaved.
Yeah. Either way,
one or t'other. John, thanks for your call, and tell everybody that you know that we'll be back again next weekend with Yogani here on 1360thesource.com. All right?
7 p.m.
Same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So, John, thanks very much for your call. If you want to check in, only a few minutes left. Unfortunately, great news for Miami basketball, but kind of rough news for us, Yogani, that we're kind of cut down in time. 877-345-3779. And I know one of the things that you like to do is you like to try to make sure that we keep this simple and that we don't get into too many intricate tools too quickly, at least here on the radio, because that's not what this is about unless somebody's got a specific question for you. So back to spinal breathing.